Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA Draft and the Motor City Cruise.
And guys, we've got an incredible guest this week, Lance Caporossi, host of the 3 Championship Drive podcast, which you can find on YouTube and anywhere else you listen to the podcast. He's joining us today. Lance, welcome to the show, man. We got a lot of news to talk about this episode.
We definitely do. First, let me just say thank you guys for letting me on the Pin Down and talk some Pistons basketball with you guys. And just real quick, shout out to my co-host, Zach, a.k.a. All County, a.k.a. Baby Brian Reeves, best co-host that I've worked with. Love that guy. Anyways, we can get into this because there's a lot of news to cover.
Yeah, definitely. So, like you said, let's just hop right in, right? The Pistons, just a couple days ago now, announced that Monty Williams will no longer be the head coach of the Detroit Pistons moving forward into this rebuild. So, Blake, let's just start there. Initial thoughts, what was your reaction when the news broke? Where are you at on that decision by Trajan Langdon?
I wasn't totally surprised, but at the same time, I thought the timing was interesting because we just talked on this show last week about how we got the news that Fred Vinson was coming in as the shooting coach. And we were like, what does that mean for the future of Monty Williams? I was throughout the whole process and the front office changes, I was pretty 50-50 on the future of Monty. And then that Vinson hire just last week tipped me to like 60-40 that Monty was staying. And my thought process after that was like, I just want to know if Monty Williams is going to be the coach of the Pistons or not. Like, if he ended up staying for another year, like, would we have got a formal, like, the Pistons are keeping Monty Williams on as their head coach? So I'm happy we got the news. I'm interested to see how the coaching search works out. It was an interesting one. And I mean, frankly, I'm just like pretty bummed that Monty Williams never worked out. I understand why he's not the coach. I just always like loved him as a guy, a coach. I love what he did with those Suns, like turning around that bubble team and taking them to the finals. So I'll never really understand why it didn't work out after being so excited about the hire. But where the franchise is and some of the reporting that we've got, that maybe it's best to just cut your losses now, bring in someone who's going to be the voice of this team for years and years moving forward. I understand it.
Yeah, for sure. And this is coming from Omari. He reported this at the Detroit Free Press, but it sounds like Trajan Langdon was more open to kind of a short-term, trial run, almost see what we have for a year or two, and then make the decision then after getting a little bit of more information, presumably with a better team as well. And, I guess credit to Tom Gores here. It sounds like ownership was the one that said, hey, look, like, make the commitment. Either he's going to be here for another 5-6 years, whatever it was, and you think he's the right guy for this rebuild, or you don't, and it's best to move on, and we'll just eat the salary. So, Lance, what were your thoughts when the news broke? And, have you changed your opinion at all on whether or not Monty Williams should have stayed kind of in the aftermath here?
Well, I didn't really like him as a coach, and I was hoping they were going to get rid of him. But I did talk about on my show that I wouldn't be surprised if he was brought back, because he's a guy that does well with veterans. He's not a guy that does really well with young players. So I thought, maybe give him another year, bring in some more NBA talent, fill out this roster and see what he can do. But the more I thought about it, I was hoping that did not happen, because I really didn't. I figured, like, even if he had like another 2 seasons with the Pistons, I figured he wasn't the coach long-term anyway. So I was ready for them just to rip the Band-Aid off. And I mean, I was really excited because looking back at his time here, even though it was just a year, it was such a disaster. And I was trying to find every excuse in the book not to blame Monty, like from a bad roster to bad players on this team, all that stuff. All the stuff he had going on in his personal life. I was trying to use all of those reasons for why he wasn't successful in his first year. But I mean, yeah, 28-game losing streak, that kind of just cuts the cake. I mean, there's really nothing you can say about that and spin it in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely not. And that was something, what you just mentioned there about kind of the longer term commitment, right? Like, if it was just going to be a situation where after 1 or 2 years they're going to cut ties, absolutely. It was the right call to rip the Band-Aid off now. The one thing, and I can't remember if we talked about this on the show or not, Blake, but the one thing I really did not want out of this decision was one way or another for us to be in a situation in February where the team's underperforming and the coach is on the hot seat. Whatever they did, and what they decided to do was move on from Monty Williams. So now whoever they bring in, like I hope that there's a long-term commitment here. Blake, you've talked about this at length on our show before, but doing this, carousel with head coaches, it's not really conducive to development for young guys. And the Pistons roster, for better or worse, is almost entirely young guys right now. So whatever they do, I hope that this is about to be a long-term commitment. Better or worse, front office is going to have the guys back at least for a few years. So the majority of whoever they draft now, their rookie contract. Lance, do you agree with that, or are you maybe a little softer on kind of the feel it out idea? I mean, this is a young team that's just starting a rebuild. It wouldn't be unusual for that not to be how this goes down.
No, I would much prefer them not try to feel things out. I would much rather them find a guy that is committed to this team and committing to the rebuild, restoring, whatever you want to call it, that he is just committed to all that. He's committed to developing these guys, committed to putting them in the best situations to play to their strengths, and honestly, this is a little bit different of an answer, but if we're like looking at the coach and he's going to be here long-term, when he says something and it's a mistake, I want him to correct it. So that's all I want. And that comes with time and patience and having a coach here for a while. I don't want him to be here for 2 seasons and they say, we got it wrong again. Let's just pull another name out of the hat and bring in another coach. Because right now you're on Cade's timeline, and I think you got 5-6 years left with him, maybe even less if he forces his way out. So you kind of got to get it right, in my opinion, this offseason. And there's really no time for a trial and error. You just got to get it right.
Yeah, and the other thing I think too is this move can definitely, I guess, reinvigorate the vibes amongst the team. I mean, obviously there's still a hire to make, and Lance, like you said, like you got to get it right, definitely. But if Monty Williams was kept on, and Wes, this is sort of similar to what we've talked about, you could have gotten into a scenario where if things don't go well, you can be like, all right, well, we saw this atrocious, historically bad season, and we didn't fully wipe our hands clean from it. So that would be the first thing you look to. So I don't know. I just think depending on the hire that they make, who the guy is, how he handles building relationships with the young team, player development, everything like that, I think it can really change like the mental side of things and just bring some good vibes into the team, which is a big deal when you have a team made up of so many young players.
The one thing that I did kind of want to talk about here on the podcast we're all on Twitter, right? And if you guys are listening and you're not on Twitter, bless your heart. I respect the heck out of you for staying off that website, but I'm not. So, I see all of these tweets, and obviously there was quite a bit of positive vibes, and it was a good thing seeing, Pistons Twitter having some positive vibes after Monty Williams, the news of his release was broke. But I do just want to caution that, Lance, you brought up the roster. I'm not sure there's a coach in this world that could have won 25 games with this roster. I mean, they just set a record for number of players to suit up in team uniform in a season. And that wasn't by accident. That was because both the front office and Monty Williams were trying anything and everything to get out of the bottom of the NBA. I mean, if we remember last offseason, front office had the expectation that this was going to be a step forward year, right? So it's not just that we fans thought it, the team thought that as well. And the fact that it went that south that quickly says something about the state of what this roster was in at the time and where it is right now as well. And I say all this to just say quickly that, look, if they win 22 games next year, that is an 8-game improvement. That's not nothing. But if you told me last offseason that they were going to win 22 games, I still think that the coach and the GM are probably going to get fired. So, like, you know, I just think we fans, we may need to pump the brakes a little bit on the expectations now. Like, hopefully this is a long-term commitment, right? Which means that next season might not go all that great. And that's all.
I mean, I'm expecting 24 wins. That's it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we haven't even seen the offseason moves.
Exactly.
It could be worse.
Hey, I'm gonna jump in with some quick, like a soft Pistons related Woj bomb. He just posted as we're recording, the Pistons have permission to interview Dallas assistant Sean Sweeney, who was in Detroit under Dwayne Casey's staff. James Edwards has brought up his name a bunch in his work on The Athletic and also his podcast. And also Minnesota assistant Micah Nori for newly vacant coaching job. The Pistons are also planning to interview former Cleveland coach J.B. Bickerstaff, who will be available to meet sooner than the rest, which is an interesting nugget at the end.
Very.
Man, yeah, because Sean Sweeney, he's kind of credited for helping develop Giannis, though, right? Or am I thinking of someone else?
He was the defense guy. So when Milwaukee was doing all the basically it was a half court trap and press system with everybody in the roster was over 6'7" or whatever with crazy long arms. That was Sean Sweeney, or at least reportedly.
So what kind of coach are you guys looking for? Someone that's defensive minded, someone that's offensive minded? What way are you guys thinking?
Personally, I am just leaning towards taking a shot on one of these like younger up and coming coaches that you know is going to be an NBA head coach one day, and someone that has seen like teams that have seen success with that philosophy, like Oklahoma City with Mark Daigneault, stuff like that. So I like that approach. I understand interviewing JB Bickerstaff. I think he's a good coach, and personally, I think his firing from Memphis and also Cleveland were kind of scapegoat moves. Like, I'm not sure if he necessarily deserved to be fired from either of those positions. So I like at least interviewing him. And of course, Mike Nori has been a hot name, and he was also an assistant in Detroit recently, I believe, under Dwayne Casey as well. So I think overall, yeah, I just want to take a shot on a younger guy. And in terms of philosophy, I don't know. Right now, I'm just leaning towards someone that is offensive minded just because of all the shooting struggles that this team has had. But you can argue that they brought on Fred Vincent. He's staying on the staff even through this Monty Williams news. And of course, you need to be like a defensive minded team to do anything. So I would be okay either way. It's just you have to surround, you have to have like the proper supplemental staff as well that is going to work to fix the holes in these guys' games that we know they have and addresses some team needs.
Is it weird that I'm like oddly nervous about JB Bickerstaff just because even though he has had success, especially 3 winning seasons with Cleveland these last 3 years, but even though he's had that success, they were willing to let him go. And it makes me wonder if they thought he was the coach that could eventually get them over the hump. And I'm wondering if he would be here long term. I think he'd have more success in his first season than Monty Williams has, but I wonder if it's like a Band-Aid approach to what they really need versus just going with someone a little bit younger that's kind of grown up in the way basketball is played today and let them kind of go through the ups and downs of their career along with this young team. I mean, I'm sure JB Bickerstaff could really help out, but I don't know if he would. I mean, it would kind of suck if like he's here 4 seasons, you would experience a winning season his 4th year, and then they're like Cleveland, like, this is not the guy that's going to get us to where we need to go. Let's go with someone else. I don't know if I really want that.
So you said something there that's pretty interesting. You mentioned a coach that is younger, but specifically had kind of grown up through their career in the way basketball is played now. I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more to that, and then if you have any like names in mind could be Sean Sweeney or Blake. Who else was mentioned there? I'm sorry, I just forgot.
Micah Nori, first
Or Mike
assistant to
Nori.
Chris Finch in Minnesota.
Right. So it could be one of those two guys or someone else too, if you have other names in mind.
Well, I really don't actually. My first name that I've ever thought of was Charles Lee. And I mean, obviously, he's going to be the head coach of the
Yeah.
Charlotte Hornets, but just meaning like there are, like, Monty came into this system like very stubborn his way. This was gonna, my way is going to work. If it doesn't work, we're going to fail by it. And what I mean by that is like, man, I mean, I guess he's not really a good example. I got to figure out the words for this though, real quick. But just a guy that's coming up with like how the game is played offensively with more spacing, not trying to figure it out on the fly. Defensively, like, it was kind of weird watching, I guess not really weird, but it was kind of, I'm gonna go with weird. It was a little weird watching Asar Thompson play defense when he first got into the league in his rookie season, because we really hadn't seen a perimeter player play defense like that. And it got me thinking, that's because he's always played against offenses like this since he's, been playing basketball. So coaching philosophy wise, that's what I would want. It's just a guy that kind of came up and, you're playing with all this space, maybe someone that started coaching like after 2009 when the infusion of Steph Curry came into the league, someone like that. I don't really have a name though, but that's just something I've been thinking about, if that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah, it does. Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, Charles Lee is a name that still sticks in the back of my mind. Like, looking back with 2020 vision, like, he probably should have been offered the job a year ago, and that definitely stinks that he can't be a part of this cycle. But like, Sam Cassell is a name I brought up too. I think he'll get a shot somewhere eventually. I don't think anyone has really linked his name to Detroit. I wouldn't mind giving him an interview. But yeah, like, Sean Sweeney and Micah Nori both make sense to me. I mean, I'm sure the candidate pool doesn't really end there, so I'd be interested to see if there are any other names that leak out that we know are gonna get an interview.
Yeah, and for me, the only other like factor that I'd probably throw in that just I want on a personal level, I really like the idea of a former player as coach, and I will readily admit that's because of the success the Detroit Lions have been having with this exact model. So I'm very prone to liking it. But the idea, it for a fan perspective, it seems entertaining, right? So a guy like Sam Cassell is someone that I watched when I was a kid. I have good memories of watching Sam Cassell when he was with the Clippers and briefly with the Timberwolves. He was a fun player. I enjoyed it. And then to turn around and see him be the head coach would just be kind of fun little full circle thing. I mean, similar if like Chauncey Billups, for some reason, we're just going to quit and then come over to Detroit, right? Like, I don't know how good he's done in Portland, but for the fan in me, that'd be a lot of fun. That was not very deep analysis, but those were the thoughts I had. But that leads us right into this question here from Bobby Buckets, our guy in the DBB comments. He just wants to know, who's your guess? Who's going to be the next head coach? Like, throw it to you. What's your gut? What are you thinking?
This is a tough one because, like, I want to say James Borrego because he has the connection with Trajan Langdon through New Orleans. But it seems like Borrego is leading the Cleveland search from what I've read. And I don't know, like, that's probably depending on what the coach is looking for. Like, I'm sure there's some like sicko guys that really want to like come into Detroit and turn this thing around, be the guy to do that, which is a huge undertaking. But Cleveland probably makes more sense for Borrego. So I'm going to say who I think it will be is Sean Sweeney, just because he has the connection here. He saw success in Dallas, and I don't like James Edwards has brought him up a bunch. So it's kind of made that name stick in my mind. And now that we know he's for sure getting an interview, it just makes me lean a little bit more to he might be the guy. And he also fits like what we've been talking about with a young coach who's going to get a shot at some point, and why not have that shot be here?
I think James Borrego. I mean, if I'm gonna gamble and bet on it, I don't know. I think he'd do pretty well in Detroit. I'm looking at his 4 seasons in Charlotte where, he had 39, 43, 23 and 42, 33 and 39, 43 and 39. I feel like this is a guy, though, if you had given him a few more seasons in Charlotte, he would have been fine. And I think Charlotte at the time it's an interesting job, but you also have to manage all those different personalities like Kelly Oubre, Miles Bridges, LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, PJ Washington, Gordon Hayward, just a whole mixed bag of different guys on that roster. And I think he did a pretty good job. I believe they were like 8th in offense that year as well, his final season. If I'm betting on it, I want to say that's the guy just because of his ties with Langdon. And I don't know, Sean Sweeney, like, I think he definitely deserves the opportunity. Over the past few years, I've only heard great things about him, but I'm just wondering if there's going to be too much pressure to get it right for a first-time head coach, in this position, because the Pistons have been bad for so long that, it might be exciting because you're kind of like going to a team with an empty canvas, but also at the same time, there's so much pressure to get this thing right that I think it would take a real special personality that has been under the fire a little bit. And I think you're going to get that with James Borrego. But I do know what you were saying, how he is kind of the guy in Cleveland, it seems like. But if I'm a betting man, I'm going to take my chance with James Borrego and say he's the next head coach.
Hey, I did see. Sorry, Wes. Really quickly before I throw it over to you, I did see someone like odds for the Pistons head coach were tweeted, and Coach K was 50-1. So that, I mean, if you're actually betting on this, like I can't imagine. I just thought that was funny as I was going through that list.
I saw
this
that.
This is my personal vendetta, guys. So I'm not going to jump on my soapbox for like 2 seconds and just say that those Vegas lines mean nothing more than that's what people are betting on, and absolutely nothing else. There's no insider. There's no some guy in a dark room that like is in contact with Trajan Langdon going, oh, all right, I know how I got to set these things. I know how I'm going to screw the bettors. Like, no, it's just where's the money going right now? And then how do we weight this so that the casino makes money? And that's it. There's nothing more. So, I mean, there are knowledgeable people that make those bets. So it's not like bad, but that's why Coach K's on there. That's why when like Killian Hayes gets released, you see, well, odds on his next team. And it's like the Sharks and China. Like, I mean, come on. Like it's a joke. It's funny, but whatever. There's no insider knowledge. Anyway, I'm gonna, because you guys took my last two, because I was leaning either Sweeney or Borrego. I'll just, I don't know, let's have fun. What about a different Dallas assistant who seems to be really, really well respected around the league? Woj just tweeted the other day about JJ Redick's trying to swipe him from Dallas to bring him in and be an assistant coach there in Los Angeles. But I don't know, take a swing on Jared Dudley. He played for Langdon in 2018 for those Nets teams that were, I mean, they were good. They weren't great, but they competed. And he was really a low minute, like locker room leader, veteran guy. He's been coaching now for a few seasons, seems to have a good reputation. I don't know, take a swing on a guy. That could be fun.
I loved him at Boston College, dude. Him and Craig Smith.
Yeah.
They were a lot of fun to watch.
Those teams are fun.
What about like David Adelman, though, from the Denver Nuggets? I think he's their lead assistant or associate head coach. I'm not sure, but maybe taking a guy that, even though I just said like maybe not invest in a guy that's looking for his first time job, but a guy that comes from a winning program and, his dad had a lot of success in the NBA. I'm sure he passed some knowledge to him as well. So David Adelman, that's another guy I was thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, like, I mean, I like the idea. And I mean, some of these guys that we're reported to have interviews in, like Sweeney and Nori, fit that bill, as well as like guys coming from teams who are at the top of the West in all their cases. So I like that idea. Honestly, I just like don't know too much about Adelman to say whether like what he would be like as a coach, but if like he's a name that I think should get a look as well. And if he's the guy that comes out through the process, you'd have to think that he did something to prove that he's the guy to lead the franchise forward, and he definitely has the background to do so. So I wouldn't be mad at that one either.
There was one article I was reading about him. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that apparently he's been given some credit towards the way the Nuggets run their offense. But I mean, you have Nikola Jokic, so I mean, how much credit can you really give the guy? But he has been given credit for the way their offense has been ran. And yeah, I mean, I like Chris Quinn, but I think why not just stay with Miami and wait till Eric Spoelstra is ready to call it quits, right? It's a great situation.
True. Yeah, true. I think with all of these candidates, it's so hard to really parse out who's done what. I mean, almost all of these people are assistant coaches. There are a few like Bickerstaff and Borrego who have been head coaches before, so you can kind of base some expectations off that. But like, what has David Letterman really actually done with Denver? We can't know. We'll never know. Same thing with all these other assistants with Sweeney, Nora. So I think for me, the only thing, like it's fun to talk about names, but the only thing that really matters is at the end of the day that the vision of what that coach wants to do, how he sees this roster building out in the future and where he wants to take it with presumably Cade Cunningham at the helm, that lines up 1-for-1 with what Trajan Langdon wants to do. Because the past few years of Pistons basketball, as we've really kind of gone into this rebuild, even back to when Blake Griffin was just really starting to hit that wall and declining, like the disconnect between ownership, front office, and coaching has just been very apparent. No more apparent than last season when Troy Weaver and Monty Williams were not on the same page. And I don't know how else you could really put that. So making sure that does not happen anymore, that there really is alignment up and down the organization, that's going to go, I think, a long way to actually getting the rebuild off on the right foot.
No, I agree with that. With everything you just said.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's dive in. Blake, you need to step it up. I mean, Lance is agreeing with me on everything I just said. You got to step up your game.
No, I'm still thinking about betting lines and how I'm not going to get rich about Mike Krzyzewski being the next head coach of the Pistons. And quickly, Mel brings up in the chat, is it Trajan or Trajan? I had an issue with this at first. It's Trajan. So enough. Yeah, just quickly clearing that up because it's kind of a hard one, not a hard one, but maybe one where you wouldn't think how it was said.
Well, sometimes
I'm just going to go with Alaskan Assassin.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I thought at first.
I got that name wrong when I was doing public address announcements for community college. The guy's name was, it was Joan, and I asked the coach, and he's like, "Yeah, it's Joan." I'm like, "Dude, there's no way his parents named him Joan." And I said it like 3 times, and then the assistant was like, "Dude, it's Jan." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Thank you for the clarification." So, yeah, I don't know why I just went with that story, but names.
That's fun.
No, that was a good one. Let's jump into this one here. This is from Team Raf in the DBB comments section. He wants to know why Bojan and Cade didn't really mix. So he says that Bojan Bogdanovic ended up being the worst pairing with Cade Cunningham last season. They had a negative 5.8 two-man lineup plus minus and 28.4 minutes per game. So why did that pairing not work? Lance, I'll jump this over to you first. And what do you think that might mean for building around Cade here in the future?
Man, I'd have to go back and actually watch the games, because I don't have like a clear memory of why this didn't work. But for one, I don't really think. I mean, Cade does play a little defense, Bojan doesn't. But I feel like with the way the lineup was set up, Bojan was going to get tough shots no matter what. And I do feel like there were times where he was given the ball in like just the final few seconds of the shot clock by Cade when he was driving and kicking, or when the defense collapsed, he was looking for him. But the offense was such a mess. I mean, I don't know why it didn't work other than going back and watching the games, but that would be my guess. Just late shot clock, defense, and just the rest of the guys around them not fitting with what they bring to the table.
Yeah, that's similar to what I was gonna say. I mean, this is it like a two-man on-off thing, which means something, but I really do think in this specific case, it's about the other players that were around them at the same time and not optimizing what you have with Cade and Bojan. Cade's a high usage guy. You don't want him to have a crazy difficult defensive assignment. You know what Bojan lacks on defense. So you're probably playing Asar Thompson next to them who helps with the defensive end, but he doesn't space the floor next to you. We're probably seeing Jalen Duren in a lot of those minutes who helps you rim run and get rebounds, but not much defensively there. So I think that's a lot of it. But at the same time, when like Bojan was the guy, if Cade wasn't finding his shot or just taking a while, like you could rely on him most nights to go and get a bucket. And the Pistons didn't have a lot of those guys in addition to Bojan. So I think that helped as well. And also, like, we're just talking about a historically bad team here. So none of the like on off numbers are going to look great, but you can definitely pluck ones that look better. I think this is an interesting one because Bojan, in theory, is a guy that would work next to Cade, at least offensively. But I think just the other players that you're surrounding them with need to first be good defenders, but also be able to shoot the ball a little bit to take some of the offensive load off of those two.
Yeah, I'll echo what you guys said. I think this has a lot to do with context more so than the players themselves. I guess those two are pretty linked, but I'm looking at the basketball reference page right now at five-man lineup combinations, and you go down the list. When Bojan and Cade are both in the lineup, for the vast majority of these, they are the only floor spacers. They're the guys that are expected to provide spacing and spread the floor for everyone else. So like you got Cade, Bojan, Duren, Ivy, Stewart. Three of those names are not guarded like shooters, even though Isaiah Stewart obviously shot a good percentage. Isaiah Livers was in there quite a bit with those two. He did not play well. Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and Asar Thompson. That's not going to go well. Like I just don't think that Cade and Bojan were put into a position where they could lift everybody else because they weren't being supported themselves. So that's why I think that these two-man lineup numbers were a little bit lower. As for what that might mean with Cade, I mean, if there is any stat that might suggest Cade can't be counted on as a floor spacer in a five-man lineup, it might be this, right? Because you're looking down at all of these lineups that Bojan Bogdanovic, who's a career like 40% guy on high volume, he is a floor spacer. But Cade Cunningham's really the only one in these lineups that would also provide something even close to that, and he just couldn't. So I think it just really emphasizes the need for shooters around Cade moving forwards at every position that you can get him at. Like if you could put four guys around Cade that can shoot the basketball, I think you're going to be better off. And that would be my takeaway from this. What do you guys think?
No, I agree with that as well. I don't really know what it means for Cade. I think what it means is just get him some better players and let's really try to figure this out. Because again, that team was just so bad. It's really hard for you to evaluate really anybody that's on this roster. So I really don't think it means much for Cade, to be honest.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is I think when you're looking at a pairing like this, I think it really tells a lot about how important the center position is for this team specifically. And like, if you have a specific archetype of a player in that role, ideally one that can space the floor, or even one that's just a really good defender, rim protector, I think it helps alongside it. Like we saw I feel like we just hang on to those Mike Muscala games so often, but we saw like what that did for the offense. So if you have a player within that archetype, like I think it does wonders for Cade as well as like the rest of the guys. Like if you have Asar Thompson on the floor as well. So I don't know. I am living in this dream that I really wish the Pistons could find a way to find a floor spacing big to put next to Cade. I don't know if that guy is out there. They're hard to come by, but if they were able to get someone like that, I feel like it definitely helps with your net rating and things like that.
Tyler Smith, man, he's coming up.
I love Tyler Smith.
Do you have him high lottery? I'm curious now because he's a good name, but now I'm just curious.
Talked about it with Steve from the Res Ball pod, and that was his surprise pick at 5. Like just saying that from fit and what he brings to a team, it seems like he's being slept on and underrated in this draft. I mean, it is kind of weird that nobody really talks about a guy that's a legit 6'10" that can block shots and space the floor. So, I mean, I have him a little bit higher. I mean, I would just take a gamble and take him at 5, but there's a couple guys I like more than him. But real quick, I think like the best 5-man lineup for the Pistons, and we saw it in the Portland. I don't know if you guys remember that Portland Trailblazers game that went to overtime, and I think Jeremy Grant had 50 points, but Jalen Duren had a 20-20 game. One of the best 5-man lineups, and I gave him the nickname the lineup of death because it would have been fun to see this team close it out, was Sasser, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, I think Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. I think their offense and defensive rating were just through the roof for like 15 minutes. It was awesome. But I guess it goes to show you too, these lineup numbers can get pretty wild if they play well for just a short stretch.
That's funny. Yeah, I have a fun time going through like Pistons rotation specific stats because I feel like you can pick out some fun, or I don't know if fun is the right word, but some interesting lineups and what they look like in short spurts because they had so many players. There were so many different like lineups out there. And yeah, quickly on Tyler Smith, I liked him too as a surprise pick for 5 at one point. Now I feel like there's just too many guys with more upside. Maybe if you're picking at number 5, like YouTube user brings up in the chat, defensive concerns with Smith. That's definitely valid. He needs to improve as a defender. He's also a little bit of like a tweener size for me. Like, I don't know if he's big enough to play the 5 at the NBA level. But if he could, I think that's an interesting name for the Pistons. And if they find a way to trade back or acquire a different pick in the mid to late first, he's a name I would definitely keep an eye on. And if you're looking at those Ignite players, like Tyler Smith had the best pre-draft season to me. He played a role. He shot the ball efficiently. And I feel like he's just a guy that you can plug and play and hopefully get some sort of like improvement as a defender there to be a real rotation piece who's a big guy that can shoot the ball, which this team could definitely use.
Yeah, for me, like I struggle to see the size thing playing the 5 as well. And like honestly, out of the Ignite guys, if I would rather experiment with Matas Puzelis as a 5 than Tyler Smith. That's kind of where I'm at with it. But let's stick with the draft real quickly here because we've got Gregory, hopefully I said that right, 1988 in the DBB comments. He wants to talk about Isaiah Stewart. So he says, would you trade Isaiah Stewart on draft day for Holland or Topic if one of them dropped out of the top 10? Blake, what do you think?
This is an interesting one because I don't know how much like Stewart is on the table. Like he is starting his extension next year. It's not like a crazy large contract or anything like that, but I feel like we know what he is to a degree at this point, and he can definitely help this team, ideally as a backup big down the line. But that said, I think in this state of the Pistons where really probably anything is on the table besides Cade Cunningham, taking some of these upside swings on guys who are falling might be worth it. Of these two names, Wes, I have an inkling of who you're going to pick. So the other one is a little more interesting to me. So I'm going to go with Ron Holland. Like, if he falls out of the top 10, I think that's good value. The shot is definitely a concern. He was asked to do a lot for the Ignite. He turned the ball over a lot, but I think he could, if all breaks right, be a potential like number 2 next to Cade. But that said, like, if the shot doesn't come along, then you have to build the team very specifically. Like, everyone else needs to be a shooter essentially. But if you're just going to find a way to get value if a guy slides, I don't hate that philosophy by any means.
I don't know if I'm trading Isaiah Stewart. There was a trade by Bleacher Report where it was Marcus Sasser to the Phoenix Suns for the 22nd pick and Damian Lee. I would totally do something like that. The reason I wouldn't trade Isaiah Stewart, even though I do love Ron Holland, I think he's going to be awesome once, if everything clicks for him. But I wouldn't trade Isaiah Stewart because as we were talking about Tyler Smith, and I messaged you about this one time, Wes, with like Nick Claxton, I think it'd be kind of cool to have Isaiah Stewart be the backup 5, but then have someone, I use Nick Claxton, but being able to use him as like a free safety or a roamer on defense, I could kind of see the same thing with Tyler Smith. So you really wouldn't have to question whether he could play the 5 or not. As long as he could still stick with 4s, you could use Isaiah Stewart as the backup 5. So I kind of like the mismatch and what you could do defensively with Isaiah Stewart as the backup. And I think that might be a little bit more valuable down the line than trading him to draft either Ron Holland or Topic later in the draft if they fall out of the top 10. Because honestly, I think it's crazy if Ron Holland falls out of the top 10. I really don't see that happening. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
I'm with you. I wouldn't trade Isaiah Stewart here either. I completely agree. Like, as a long-term backup big, he's the exact type of player that a lot of contending teams right now are actually even looking for. Just the guy that's switchable, he can shoot, and he can do all the dirty work as that backup kind of combo big. So that's super valuable that the Pistons already have that, but they don't have a roster where they can utilize the talent like that. That was like one of the bigger shames to me watching last season. But as for, Holland or Topic is, to me, he's the second best player in this draft class behind Alex Starr. Like, the guy, he's 6'6", he's incredibly skilled, and he has very, very good processing ability with the ball in his hands. Like, this is another big point guard, and everyone's going to say, well, why would you want that with Cade? But I'm still falling back on, I don't know how you could have two big, incredibly high IQ, high-level processors who can make things happen off the dribble. I don't know how two of those guys don't work together. Like, I can't think of a single example in recent history where that's not worked out. Like, outside of injury issues, right? I can't think of a single example. Even like Luka and Kyrie or Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. Like, those aren't even perfect one-to-one examples here. Probably the closest would be SGA and Giddey. But, like, that worked. This is all work. They're all very good teams, and the Pistons have been crap. So I'm very open to Topic. But that said, Isaiah Stewart, I would rather keep him than take a swing in this instance. But actually, let's jump to a voicemail here. Let's do this one here. This is from Baked Over, and he's asking about Fred Vincent.
Hello. Baked Over here, watching the Tigers. They're up 10-0. My question is, how soon can Vincent start working with Jaden Ivey? Does Vincent make house calls? How soon is that going to start? Thank you.
All right, Lance, I want to go to this one. Have this one go to you first, but do you watch the Tigers? Are they up 10-0 often? Like, what happened here where they were winning by that much?
I do not watch the Tigers often unless I'm actually going to the game. So I have no idea. I do follow a little bit on Twitter, and it seems like the offense really isn't there from game to game. Seems like the pitching's there most games, but the bats aren't there. I have no idea when he can start working with Fred Vincent, but I'm sure it's probably already happened because I still remember that story of Kawhi Leonard. They draft him, and then like 8 hours later, he's in the gym for San Antonio working on his shot. I'm sure it's probably the same thing with Fred Vincent and Jaden Ivey. There was a clip of him, I believe, of him working out with his younger brother. So the dude's always putting in work, but I don't know when exactly it happens for a shooting coach and a player to get together. But if it hasn't happened already, I'm sure it will happen soon.
Yeah, I just have to say I haven't watched the Tigers since Bally Sports and Comcast have had that whole spat, which I've kind of just let that whole thing go. But it's definitely something I'm going to need to figure out before the Pistons season. So if anyone who has any control over that is listening, like, please fix something. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where Jaden Ivey is really spending his summer, but you'd have to think at the very least, hopefully they've talked, if not worked out together already. Because yeah, I'm with Baked Over, like, get some of those reps, get in the gym as soon as possible. I think it's just a thing of we don't really know where Fred Vincent or Jaden Ivey are right now. I'd like to think that Fred Vincent is in Detroit, like with some of these draft workouts that are going on. And if he can at the very least like talk to Jaden Ivey and figure out a way to get in the gym as soon as possible, that would be great. Cause yeah, I'm with Baked Over. If Jaden Ivey is going to be a part of this team for the long haul, you definitely want to see him improve as a shooter as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I don't know for sure, but obviously the hire has been made official at this point. So hopefully that can happen immediately. I assume that it can. But Lance, I'm curious, when they made that hire, did that change any outlook that you had for, either the draft or free agency or even just team building in general? Or this is a position that pretty much only the Pistons have not had filled for quite some time. So, there are many teams that do have a shooting coach. So I can see this going both ways. But I was just curious your reaction when that happened, if that kind of changed any of your outlook.
Yeah, I think I tweeted out that I think guys like Ron Holland and Booz Ellis and Cody Williams, they're very much in play at number 5 now that you have a shooting coach in place. Because I really thought it's probably Dalton Connect or Reed Shepherd if he slips to 5. You got to bring in shooting. But now that you actually have a developmental coach in there that has worked for 14 years in New Orleans and has had success with guys like Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, all those guys. Yeah, I think it changes the way you can actually go ahead with the draft. Not sure about like free agency or anything like that. Maybe you can take a reclamation project, but for the draft, having that guy in place, I think it puts a few more guys on your big board.
Yeah, and for me, I'm with you there, Lance. I think like Fred Vincent's opinion on some of these prospects that are going to be available at number 5 should be held in high regard, because a lot of these guys that you're looking at, like, we know Dalton Connect's going to shoot it. We know Reed Shepherd can shoot it, but guys like Modest Buzelis, like Ron Holland, some of the other players that might be in play, I think you need to know from Vincent, like, does he see something with the shot? Does he see something that him and the rest of the team can work with? Because as I'm going through and watching a lot of these guys, it's just like, man, if only the shot were there, like they're a shot away from really being a real piece that the Pistons can use. So I think if he sees something that he can at least work with and improve to a degree, that could change how the Pistons are operating on draft night.
Yeah, I struggle with this one, honestly, because like if you watch these videos that are out there of Vincent working with former players with the Pelicans, like if you've played basketball, nothing new is being taught here. And that makes a lot of sense. These are NBA basketball players. They're all the best basketball players in the entire world. So like, you're not giving him any new information. I could see maybe if like he's a fantastic motivator, or if he has some way of connecting with these players that, sparks that ability for them to go work and improve their shot. Like I could see that. But the one thing where I do really think there is an impact is what you just said, Blake, where if Fred Vinson looks at a guy in a workout and just goes, he ain't going to get better. Like he can't, he doesn't have it, right? He's not going to improve that shot, just gut feeling. I think you really got to take that into account. So that ability that he might have to look at a player, kind of make a read on how they might work together and how they might improve, I think that's going to be really important. But in terms of like the actual coaching, I mean, he's going to be doing a lot of rebounding, and it's going to be a lot of reps for the players, which presumably they're doing anyway. And yeah, so YouTube user says that they do change mechanics, and they do. A lot of coaches do. Matas Buzel's with the G League Ignite was messing around with his mechanics as well, trying to prove them, streamline them. Like none of this is unique to Fred Vinson. That's my only point. But I think his eye is, and that's going to be really important.
I do remember working with a shooting coach when I was in high school, and I mean, I'm 6 foot, so like I do a lot of fading, like when I'm playing against bigger players. And I remember him telling me, he's like, the thing when you're shooting threes is you're just leaning a little too far back. You need to go more straight up. So I think Fred Vinson, like sometimes that's all it is with some guys' shots is the mechanics are fine, but their balance may be off. Their footwork might need to be adjusted a little bit. Maybe their elbow needs to be tucked in, something like that where they've heard it all throughout their careers, but you actually have someone in the gym reminding you, bring your elbow in, set your feet this way, go straight up. That can make a huge difference. And when he's looking at some prospects like a Ron Holland, he might say, yeah, I can fix his shot because he's only doing this wrong. Like A and B are good, but C is off and I can correct C. So that's why I'm a little bit more, that's why I was really excited about the hire.
I was really excited about it just because I've been personally begging the Pistons to hire a shooting coach forever. They have not had one. Like my entire lifetime, I feel like I do not recall a single shooting coach on the Detroit Pistons. And this was something like you mentioned Kawhi Leonard, right? He had a shooting coach with the Spurs that was very highly regarded. Tons of teams do this. Why weren't the Pistons until now? So I'm just glad they got a good one. But let's stay on this because you were talking about the Ignite guys. This is Mel75 in our live chat. He wants to know better prospect, Buzelis or Cody Williams. Lance, I'm interested to see what you think.
Oh man, I really love Cody Williams, and I've warmed up to Buzelis because when I watch him play, like there's sometimes I'm reminded of like Andre Karolinko and Sean Marion, where he's just that utility player. But there's also a part of me that thinks like, man, it's just, are the Pistons really in a position where they could use a utility player like that right now as the roster stands? And I think Cody Williams might be better on day one, but better long-term prospect that has more star appeal, I guess, and that probably has the higher ceiling. I would say it would go to Buzelis over Cody Williams.
Yeah, I have Modest higher on my board. I will say, as this like Cody Williams buzz to the Pistons has been happening as of late, I've thought about it, like wondering if I've been a little too hard on him just because he did battle through a number of different injuries through his first season at Colorado. And both of these guys are going to need time. So this is a great question because I think they're similar prospects to a degree. I guess I give Modest the nod just because of the size and the different lineup configurations you can use with a guy like him, but both of them have to shoot it. Like Cody was an efficient shooter, but did it on low volume. I just think like Modest needs to add some size. He needs to work on the shot. And then like, if those things come to fruition, I don't know how much time it will take. I can see him reaching a higher ceiling compared to Cody, but hey, I could be totally wrong. That's the fun of the draft.
Blake, I'm about to shock you. So obviously we've been lower here in the past on this show on Cody Williams, but I just made this change on my big board 2 days ago because I was watching a few Matas Buzelis games, even the College Sky Park game where he played really well, and I got even lower than what I was before. I just don't see it as a wing. As a forward or maybe even a combo big, I would be very interested in trying to figure it out. But he dribbles very upright. He's not the most laterally gifted athlete, even though he can jump pretty well. The shot, like I mentioned earlier, he was definitely tweaking with mechanics. Maybe that's better now, but I don't have any access to workouts, so I don't know how that's going in closed gyms, behind closed doors. So just based on the tape, like the shot needs a lot of work. He didn't shoot it well from the free throw line, so that's not a good indicator. He's a guy that, like, if you were going to play him as a combo big and really lean into his ability to block shots, which I do think is going to translate, I would be a lot more open to it. But listening to Matas talk, I don't think he views himself that way. I think he views himself as kind of a 3, maybe even a 2 in situations. And I just don't buy his ability to score, really, with the ball in his hands right now. Whereas Cody Williams, like if we're talking about wings, it's small sample size, but that just means everything for Cody Williams was basically a flash. So there's a lot of good flash, a lot of bad flash, but I buy it as a wing. So I think in that context, I actually have now dropped Buzelis down. To be completely fair, Williams I have at 13 and Buzelis at 15. So it's not like I'm over the moon about either of these guys, but I did just switch them because I don't see this wing thing with Buzelis. He dribbles like I dribbled, which is hips low, chest up. You're not beating anybody like that. I was a shooter for a reason, guys.
And Cody has like a 7'1" wingspan, so that's like I think in the thought is like Buzelis has more defensive upside, but if you're worried about lineup configuration, like what Matas really is, like I think both of these guys need time again. Like Cody needs to add strength, Matas needs to add strength, but I don't think Cody is going to be a bad defender by any means. Like I think he can actually be some sort of a weak side rim protector, like Matas gets a lot of pluses for in his evaluations.
Yeah, for sure. And let's just do this one really quick from our guy Richard Brooks. He wants to know where we all have Ron Holland on our big board, and since I have it up and I'm looking at it, I'll go first. Number 9. So I assume, Lance, you're going to be a lot higher than I am with Ron Holland, right?
Yeah, he would be. I would draft him at number 5. I think, man, he's probably one of the 3 best players to me in this draft. I just really like, every time I watch him play, and I've made this comparison to a few people, and some guys have just laughed at me because they think it's kind of funny, but he does honestly remind me of like Toronto Raptors Tracy McGrady before he blew up in Orlando. Like when I just watch him play, when he just glides to the rim, the way he's finishing at the rim, the way he can use his athleticism, the motor defensively, it's just, there's a lot to love about Ron Holland. And I think he gets a bad rap for the shooting because the G League guys, they didn't play with a point guard, and I'm not
Ron
saying
Holland was the point guard.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, when you play with a guy that can set the table for you and put you in a position to get good looks and good shots, your shot's going to look a little differently. I'm not saying his field goal or 3-point percentage will skyrocket, but I think a guy like Cade Cunningham, he could do wonders playing with a Ron Holland just by putting him in the right position to get easy, efficient shots. And I just think the shooting thing is, yeah, it is a little nerve-wracking to see it, but I also think because of the situation they were in, it might be a little misleading. I think he's probably better than what is advertised right now. So that's why I have him much higher.
Like, if I could jump in real quick. So YouTube user brings up the Ron Holland, Asar Thompson kind of comparison thing. And Lance, what you just said, I think that's where the comparison breaks down, because obviously Asar Thompson was a fantastic defender coming into the league, but really bad 3-point shooter. he was, I think, 18%, if I'm remembering right, from three. Not good at all. Well, Ron Holland already shot better than 18%. Not much. I think it was about 5 or 6% better. Wasn't he at 24 or 25 from three? Blake, if you could look that up for me, that'd be great while I keep going. But okay, so he already shot better from the NBA line than Asar Thompson did last season from three. So those numbers are already comparable. And like you said, Lance, he was doing a lot of self-created threes. I think he kind of had that between the legs, step back, self-created three-point jump shot almost as a go-to move that he went to quite a bit. So I don't see this Asar Thompson comparison much at all. Like, to me, he looks like a rookie Jaylen Brown type. And the caveat with that is that there have been a lot of rookie Jaylen Brown types, and there's really only one Jaylen Brown right now. So, it's a risky pick, but I don't think the Asar thing's really fair to Ron Holland. Like, if someone right now said that you would rather have Ron Holland than Asar because of the offensive upside, I wouldn't disagree. Like, I wouldn't make the argument, but I could see it.
I also think Ron Holland has more of an identity offensively than Asar Thompson did coming into the draft. And same thing with Buzelis. Like, Buzelis, there's nothing you really see him do offensively where you're like, okay, he can lean on that. And I mean, you can look at Ron Holland, you say, okay, yeah, he can get away in the NBA doing that stuff. Same thing with Cody Williams, who shot like 73% at the rim on 91 attempts. It was just something absurd. He can get to the rim and finish. But back to Ron Holland and Asar Thompson, when I was watching Asar, and the reason I didn't like the pick initially until Summer League happened, because there was a lot of shots and, shots he was making in the Overtime Elite League that you are not getting in the NBA. Like, he was getting alley-oops thrown from him in the half court from, like, where the guy was throwing it from half court, and he was just standing in the post. And I'm like, the length and the athleticism will not allow you to catch lobs like that in the NBA. And there was quite a few plays where he was finishing that way. So I don't really see the comparison between Ron Holland and Asar, just because Ron Holland, again, in my opinion, has more of an identity on the offensive side than Asar Thompson did.
Yeah, and just to jump in with those numbers, the full season with the Ignite, Ron shot 24% from three. I have him, and I'm going to do one more update on my big board. I have him at 7. He might jump up to 6 just because I have Nikola Topic higher, and I don't know about the injury stuff. I'm not sure where I'm at with that. But so I think I'm like higher on Holland than maybe some other people's are. But there are people who are extremely high on him. Like, the Field of 68 did a big mock draft, and Jonathan Wasserman from Bleacher Report was on there, and he said he has Ron Holland at number 1 on his board, and he said like he feels like he's taking crazy pills trying to convince people on Ron Holland. But what I'll say is I really like the player. I just don't love the fit here. I think Ron would be better suited where there's more like at least 2 pieces that are in place that you're building around. Like, if he goes at 6 to Charlotte and you put him in between LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, I think that's more of a define, like, he could have success with that. If the Pistons are truly just building around Cade and only Cade, and you keep Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, Asar, all these young guys, and insert Ron Holland, and he's not really sure what he is. Like, if he wants to be number 1, if he wants to be number 2 to Cade, like, I think the development, like, he might be better suited with a team that has more in place. But that said, like, we just spent all that time talking about Fred Vincent, and the biggest question for me with Ron is the shot. If there's a way for him to fix that, like, you can talk me into it.
And you're absolutely right to bring up that he was asked to do too much. I mean, Lance, you kind of touched on it as well with the frequency that he played point guard. Like, this is not a role that Ron Holland is going to have in the NBA. I really doubt that he's going to be asked to be a lead scorer like that, or even, a top 3 scorer like that right away in the league. So maybe when that volume turns down, like you said, and he's got a very specific role, he starts to excel. I could absolutely see that. But because this is our last episode here before the draft, I wanted all of us to, before we dive into one last voicemail, to just go through the list of guys that we would consider at 5. So it doesn't have to be in order, but guys that, A, you think are going to be there or potentially could be there and available, and then B, that are worth considering. So there's going to be a cutoff here, and it's probably not going to include Alex Sarr. Blake, why don't you go first? Just like based on tiers, who are guys you're going to have like in play at 5?
Okay, so only excluding Sarr.
Excluding anyone that you think definitely is not going to be on the board.
Okay.
So, like, I'm going to have Risacher there because I think there's a world where he drops, and I have him number 3 for me personally.
Yeah. I think there's a world where Risacher slides too, so I'll include him. Other than that, for me, honestly, I don't think Reed Shepherd is going to slide to 5. Like, all the connection between him and Houston, if Houston stays put, that makes sense. But if he's there, you have to consider him. The other names for me are the UConn guys, Donovan Clingan and Steph Castle. And then I just go to that wing group, like Dalton Connect, Ron Holland, Modest Buzelis. And then we've heard the Cody Williams buzz. So whoever you like the most out of that wing group, like, I know that's a need. So I wouldn't be mad at that philosophy. But that said, I do have guys like Clingan and Steph Castle a bit higher on my board.
Lance, you want it or you need a little more time? I'm ready to go if you need it.
No, I can go. I'm just looking at my old list that I had. So I'm going to exclude Risacher, even though I do see a world where he does slide. And if he slides, then you can forget every name that I'm going to talk about. But and also I'll take Reed Shepherd off my list as well. But the 5, in no particular order, Donovan Clingan, I really like his game. And I think for at least 2 years, you could play him and Jalen Duren, not together on the floor, but you could just have those guys, splitting time, kind of like how Walker Kessler does it for Utah. I really like Ron Holland. I really like Cody Williams. I'm going to throw in Buzelis in there as well, just because, you know what I'm saying? Like, he still has a lot of potential, even though he doesn't give you much right now offensively. The defensive thing, like, I think he kind of reminds me a little bit of Franz Wagner. So, and I really like Franz. So I'm definitely going to stick with Buzelis. And then since Reed and Zachary, they would have been in here. I really like, I want to say Devin Carter. I really like him too.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so he's someone I really like as well. I started watching a little bit more of him a couple weeks ago, and that dude is just a dog. And I really like what he brings to a team. I mean, I don't think you draft him at number 5, but that would be really, really cool. Then also one more, because I talked about this on my show, and it was the surprise pick at number 5, Rob Dillingham, just because he's a bucket getter. Even though he is small at 6'1", the dude can really just flat out play basketball on that side. And I feel like if you could do a lineup of Cade, Rob, Simone Fontecchio, Sarr, and just say Jalen Duren, there's still enough size to cover up for what he lacks in that department.
All right. The only names I'm going to add here are Nikola Topic, just because, again, like I think he's the second best player in this draft. So if he's there at 5, I don't care if he's going to redshirt, like take that redshirt year and structure this roster so that you can handle Cade and Topic and then let them hit the ground running. But outside of that, Risacher, which we talked about, Dalton Connect, Tijon Saloon, I really think he should be considered at 5. And Gavoni's keeping my dreams alive here because he mentioned that his range is probably 4 to 14, which is the vast majority of the lottery. So who knows really what will happen there. But the fact that it started at 4, that gives me hope. I think Saloon needs to be considered there. And I really like Clingan as well. I was going to bring up Carter, though, because he's a guy I've got like right on the cusp where if you are a person that really buys into his jump shot, he's kind of that middle ground in a way between Reed Shepherd and Nikola Topic, where he can do the playmaking, but he's a better defender on ball than both of those guys. He's strong, so he's got good size, even though he's not tall. Incredible athlete, And if you buy that jump shot, like if you think he's going to shoot 38 or higher % from three in the NBA, that is a plug and play guard next to Cade Cunningham that does just about everything you could want out of a two guard kind of combo guard there. So like 5 seems early, but I get it. That's all I'm saying. I get it.
Yeah, I don't think Carter, like, I love him. I don't think he's gonna go 5, but like I could see him going 6 and like he just does everything right. Essentially,
He does.
he's small. He's small. Like it's not like the cleanest fit if that's the only thing you're taking into account. But he's a good rebounder for his size. He's a strong defender. Like you just know you're getting a dog with him. So I don't hate it. I just think like where the Pistons sit on the board, it's not like fully realistic, but I don't know. It would be fun.
Well, and if you're going to be small, right, guard point guards really well on the ball, which is not something that Reed Shepherd is going to do, but Devin Carter will. So I don't know. It's interesting. Lance, any last thoughts before we do one voicemail and then get you out of here?
Nah, no, I got nothing. I'm trying to think, but I got nothing for you guys. Get to the voicemail. I want to hear these.
Wait. You got to say one good thing about Tidjane Salon because that's what we do here on this podcast. I need to hear it. Go.
Dude, I knew. Okay, I've been listening to you guys, and I know you guys bring them up. So I was just quickly trying to cheat my way through this. And the thing I will say that he does have working for him, he does play with a high motor, and you gotta love motor guys. So maybe there's a little Pascal Siakam in him somewhere.
See, there you go. If anyone's aggregating, Lance Caporossi loves Tidjane Salon. That's all that matters here.
Wes, before we get to it, just because this is our last episode before the draft, can I just throw out a couple stretch names just because like draft talk is almost over. So if we're talking ourselves into Devin Carter, like I can also talk myself into Jared McCain. I think he has a case to be the best shooter in the draft next to Reed Shepherd, Dalton Connect. Maybe he's better. Carter is much better defensively, but just talking about McCain as a smaller guard who rebounds well for his size. He's strong. He can play defense, just isn't as good a defensive prospect as Carter. And also, like, this isn't a fit for the Pistons at all, but if you guys haven't been watching a ton of like Bub Carrington, like that dude is just so fun to watch. Like I'm interested to see where he ends up. I wish it made sense for the Pistons, but just a fun player who can get buckets.
I like Jared McCain as well too. I even like Keyshawn George from Miami. Oh, yeah. I think that's I remember. Yeah, I just like him. I know he's a little bit. I think he's 20 years old, but still, like I really like what he brings. And if they were going to trade back with like say Chicago and draft at number 11, I'd be totally fine with that guy at that spot.
Yeah, one more name kind of similar to that is to me like I don't know where this guy is going to go, but Ryan Dunn is the best perimeter defender in this draft. And there's a little bit of upside there offensively. Like Virginia is not a good system for anybody to really develop as an offensive player. So like you said, like if you trade back and you just kind of want to take an upside swing on a potential like offense defense kind of wing who's already going to be a great defender right away, like I get it. I like him a lot. I don't know if he's going to go that high, but I like him a lot. He's fun to watch as well.
He has a 7'1.5" wingspan as like a I mean 6'6" without shoes. Like he's just crazy long. Like he's gonna be a good defender.
Good athlete too. Vertical pop, he's got it. Like he's gonna be great on defense. If he figures out the offensive side of the ball enough to like play starters minutes, I think he's kind of all NBA defense upside. It's just like that if was massive. That was a massive if that I just said. If he figures out how to be passable on offense, like he's not close. It's a ways away.
Yeah, what's his role? And just quickly, Richard Brooks brings up in the chat like that he likes Ryan Dunn too. Would he slip to the late second? I don't think so, but I
not
think
that far.
Yeah, if there's a
Yeah,
way
he's a
that
first round pick.
yeah, the Pistons can get into the mid to late first. If he slides, I think absolute floor is top of the second. So if they maneuver around, like maybe there's a world where he ends up here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get to this last one here. This is from our guy, Base Pistons. He's asking about, well, I'll just let him say it. It's a fun little Seinfeld reference. This was a great question.
Hey, Wes and Blake, this is Space Pistons again. And with the firing of Monty Williams and the new front office coming in, it made me think the last few years, the Pistons have hired, a former coach of the year and Ben Gundy, Casey, and Monty Williams, and mostly have done the same thing in the draft, a young, raw talent. And I'm thinking maybe this offseason, what if they just did the opposite of whatever they normally do, and maybe that's the best way to go. So they hired JJ Redick, a guy with no coaching experience as head coach. Draft Dalton Connect, a guy who's an older player who's just a pure shooter. And basically, I don't know, you can tell me what you think they should do for free agency, but maybe they should do the George Costanza and just do the opposite of all what they would normally do, and maybe they will have a tremendous off season. Anyway, can't wait to listen to the pod live.
All right. First of all, fantastic Seinfeld reference. That is one of the best episodes of the entire show. The opposite. Great stuff. Love that. But what do you guys think, just kind of as a path forward for the rest of this offseason? JJ Redick was just hired, so he's off the table, but a coach of that mold that's got no experience, take the swing on that guy, because in the past, the Pistons have not done that. Draft a guy who is a little more proven, not an upside swing, because the Pistons haven't done that recently. Lance, what do you think about just taking the initial instinct of this organization and saying, that's wrong, do the opposite?
I mean, it would be really funny for them to do and have it all work out. It would just be amazing. And then you'd have to hope that there's a Seinfeld day in Detroit. But I don't know, maybe just follow the blueprint of what successful franchises do. I think I prefer that than them just going that would be the opposite of what they've been doing all along anyway. But yeah, I like the idea. It's just so funny because I cannot stop thinking of that episode right now. And yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I could give a better answer than what I just did. But yeah, I think doing the opposite, it would be really funny. But just finding the right guys and finding the right guy that has a game plan that can communicate that game plan to everybody from top on down, that's the way I would go.
Yeah, I would be good with definitely doing like the opposite of what was done recently that hasn't worked. For free agency specifically, like what the Rockets did last year, I don't hate the idea, but just like the issue is the Pistons don't have a ton of draft capital to fall back on. So if you can at least take on someone's salary to get some sort of draft assets in return, that would be interesting to me. But you absolutely need to sign players who can help your team and not just fully punt all your cap space like you did and bring in guys who don't contribute to the roster. My only other, I guess, opposite thought to the idea would just be, I think there's a degree to where the Pistons sit on the board where you have to take an opportunity to take some sort of swing. Like Base Pistons brought up Dalton Connect. Like, yeah, he's an older guy. I don't think he's a fully baked product. Like, I think he still has room to improve, but obviously not as much upside as a guy like Cody Williams, Ron Holland, Modest Buzelis. Just like picking in the top 5 is so hard because I think you have to take a swing to a degree, and it's just, are you right or wrong? But you can argue with me that like this class of any class makes more sense to draft for fit and take a guy like Connect, for example, who I think is a good prospect. Like, I don't think he's not worth it at 5. It's just there are definitely some other plays that have more upside.
I love this question because this is the type of question that validates us opening up this voicemail line to me, because this is hilarious and there's no way that this would come in through a comment. We if it came in through the DVB comments, we'd have to distill it so much because of the character limit here on StreamYard that it would not come through the same. And if it was a live comment, I think the same problem happens where it would be like a long string of many comments and we're not going to pull them all up at once. So I love that we get to do this. And I'm also now just thinking about the episode as well. That was a great episode. If I'm going to take it seriously, though, go ahead.
Oh, no, I did have a final thought, but it has nothing to do with this. So you get your thought out, and then I'll share it towards the end. I was just thinking about something.
Okay, love it. Yeah, we'll do that. I'll throw this to you right after this. My only thought, so if we're going to take it seriously, I think that this is probably the wrong approach to any hiring or free agent or draft decision moving forward. But I would say the same thing about like the inverse. Like if you think that they really need to go hire an experienced coach and that they really need to go take upside swings, like I think that that's probably the wrong approach as well. The best thing that you could do, in my opinion, is if you're Trajan Langdon, you look at this and you say, I don't care about the background, I don't care about the archetypes, none of that matters. All that matters is getting the right people into the right spots within this organization. So if the right person for the head coaching position happens to be someone that's very inexperienced, but he's completely aligned with Trajan Langdon, and there's going to be unity in that way, he's a good communicator, he's the right man for the job, then great, that's the guy that you hire. And at the same time, if you're going through the draft process and it's an upside swing instead of someone that's a little bit more, sure thing, then great. If it's the right person, that's the guy you bring in. Because I think looking back now at what may have gone wrong with the Troy Weaver era and this rebuild that happened and failed, is that almost every pick was just straight highest upside, highest ceiling, best player available type move. And it never ended up making sense all the way together. Like almost every trade too, it was either a home run swing on a young player, like a second draft candidate, or it was a kind of kick the can down the road move to keep flexibility. Those are clearly the tenets that the organization had, instead of just kind of going case by case and doing what's best in that moment, or at least what you think is best in that moment. That could go wrong too. Nothing's going to bat 100%, right? It's never going to be perfect. But I've started to think that flexibility is probably more valuable here at the restart of this rebuild. Lance, your thoughts that you teased before.
No, I'm glad you said that about Troy Weaver, because that was like one of my biggest pet peeves about him. Was it always seemed like he was just swinging for the fences in every single draft. And you're like, dude, you got it right with Cade Cunningham, and you should just try to, whatever you think he's going to be, just draft players that fit around what you think he's going to be. And I do one thing too about him, his tenure here. The one thing that I thought was super weird was during the COVID draft, trading for multiple first round picks, and when you really didn't have the same process for evaluating guys, I thought that was kind of crazy. But my real final thought that I was going to share with you guys, because we didn't talk about free agency, tell me if I'm crazy or not, but I have a feeling like if the Pistons sign Malik Monk, it will be kind of like Josh Smith all over again. And the reason is because Malik Monk, he's only started 38 games in his career, 37 for the Lakers, and that was a good 37 starts. I think it was 17 points per game, 42% from three, 4 rebounds, and assist or 2 a game, whatever. But in Sacramento, he's really found a home. He has a role, but him coming to Detroit, say he does do that, he's not going to have that same role. He's going to have a lot more pressure on him. He's going to have a lot more responsibility. He's not going to be able to hide behind a De'Aaron Fox and a Sabonis and a Keegan Murray and all those other guys they have there. So I think if the Pistons, not saying it's a bad signing, I just think this team is not set up for a guy like Malik Monk to be brought in and play the way he's played in the same role that he has played with. And I feel like it might be too premature of a move for the Pistons to bring a guy like that in right now and expect him to change the fortunes of this franchise. And that's what I think a lot of Pistons fans are leaning on. Like, they see Malik Monk and they're like, well, if he played more minutes and he had more shots, he could be this. And I really don't think he is that guy, because we've seen him in bad situations. Like he was in Charlotte. He didn't look like a lottery pick when he was on a bad team. He just kind of looked like a guy that would be out of the league in like 6 years. And now that he's found a home in Sacramento, I just don't think it's going to carry over to Detroit. But that was my final thought. And yeah, if you wanted to end it right there, that's totally fine with me.
I'll just say we had like a Malik Monk, Jaden Ivey conversation on the show last week. But the thing that scares me about the Monk signing is I think he's at a point in his career where he's about to get paid, and he is just not like he's just taking that and is not going to go to the right situation, because like he's earned the opportunity to get paid. But yeah, Lance, you're right. If he comes here and he's getting a lot more usage and is on a totally different team than what he was before, maybe it doesn't carry over. And I don't know what the exact numbers would look like, but if you're signing him to like a 4-year deal with a player option at the end and he doesn't give you what you're looking for, like man, that player option in the last year is really going to hurt. So yeah, I think it's risky. The thing about it for me is like, we know this team needs to add shooting. So like where else is it going to be? Is it from the draft, or are you just going to get maybe not, I don't know if I want to say lower level, but guys you can get for cheaper that are decent shooters on lower volume or whatever it may be. So it's a risk, but at the same time, like there needs to be some sort of risk at some point, whatever those might be.
Dude, I say go after Lonnie Walker. 38%
Yeah,
on like
sure.
5 attempts. Solid perimeter defender. Not the creator that Malik Monk is, but a guy that kills it in transition and can hit an open shot. I mean, I'm totally fine with that, and spending the money, whether it's bringing in a big contract or signing someone like Claxton or Hartenstein, if you want to go that route, I'm totally fine with that.
So I'll just say this, and then I'll throw it back to you to get the last word on it before we close it out. But I think the two things are really true with Malik Monk, because I think you're right. The Pistons are not in a position right now, roster-wise, to set him up for the same level of success that he's had in the past. But the one role that he has proved himself to be very effective and very worthwhile at is not a difficult role to replicate, if that makes sense. So the Josh Smith situation, Josh Smith needed to be a star, and he needed to have all this volume. And if that didn't work, then he was done. It was cooked. It was over. And that was the end of it. If you sign Malik Monk and you expand his volume and it doesn't work out, well, in the following offseason, because Malik Monk, you're right, Malik Monk is not going to save you, right? But in the following offseason, if it didn't work out, if he really didn't continue to have that same efficiency and still be the same type of player, just at a better volume, if that doesn't happen, then you can sign and draft players that push him back to the bench, where you know he's going to be successful, where you can replicate that role as a sixth man of the year candidate with more talent above him, because his contract also isn't going to be crippling at this point. It looks like it's probably in that 23 to 27-ish range, which as the CBA continues to grow, that's going to be a deal. So I think that there is risk here where he's very unproven in the role that he would be coming to Detroit to fill. But at the same time, if it doesn't work, you can still get him back to where he was role-wise within the roster, and it'll look good. It just won't be what you hoped for.
I like that. It's a good way to end it.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for sticking around here. We got an extra 10 minutes out of you. We really appreciate it. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find your work, where they can find you online, anything you want to plug, go right ahead. Thank you so much for joining, man.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it. I do not get an opportunity to be a guest on many people's podcasts, so this is awesome. I really do enjoy doing this. But you guys can follow me on X at Lance Caporossi the same way you see it spelled on the screen. You can follow me on Instagram at 3 Championship Drive. All I do is just post clips of my own podcast, 3 Championship Drive, and I mean, I interact with pretty much everybody that throws me a comment, whether it's extremely hateful or loving. I will respond back most of the time, I promise. But you can follow me on YouTube at 3 Championship Drive, a Pistons podcast. You can subscribe over there. And then you can also look for the podcast on Apple and Spotify and all of those podcasting platforms. But do me a favor, tell a Pistons fan. I do appreciate that.
Lance, thank you so much for joining. This was great. Honestly, open invite anytime that you want to come on. We love talking hoops with you. I'm also going to throw in a shameless plug at DBB. I dropped a Pistons draft guide today. Just quick hitters, measurements, stats, sales pitch on 31 guys in this draft. So really whatever the Pistons do, like you can learn more about them there just on DetroitBadBoys.com. And thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. And thank you to Based and Baked Over for the voicemail questions. Reminder, you can call the number to ask a question and hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. And special thanks to Sean Court, managing editor at Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys again for all the great questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week for our live draft show. Shameless plug. Join us during the first round of the draft. Whether on your commute following or live with us here on YouTube, we can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.